Welcome to the Cloud Pod, where the forecast is always cloudy. We talk weekly about all things AWS, Google, and Azure. We are your hosts,
Justin,
Jonathan,
and Peter.
Episode 23, recorded on May 13th. Unlock the podcast with your Android device. Good evening. Good evening. It's another wonderful night here on the Cloud Pod, and we have a bunch of stuff to get into. But how are you guys doing?
Great, Justin. How are you?
It's been a little bit of an interesting week for me, but it's ended on a good note, and so that's the best that we can look for.
Cool.
Awesome. I'm just looking to hang on till the weekend.
Indeed. All right. Well, let's get into it then. Amazon S3 has apparently been doing some deprecations of APIs, particularly the path style API requests starting in September 30th, 2020 will be disabled for new buckets. This was a course correction that occurred after they first announced it on the forums around the 30th of April, and the internet lost their minds about the fact that they were going to disable this path style known as version 1 in the S3 buckets. And so basically give you guys some context. Basically, the bucket names on the very one were s3.amazon.aws.com/bucket name and then a key. And then as part of V2, they changed it to bucketname.s3.amazonaws.com/the key, which would be the object. And so that was the original way you did it back when I started with AWS many, many moons ago. And now but V2 has been pretty much the predominant way. Most people have been doing it for a while. The SDK has been doing it that way for a long time. And so Amazon was trying to basically deprecate this functionality back on the forum post on the 30th, which then caused some uproar in the community. What do you guys think about the first part of the announcement?
I was disappointed, actually. I really wish they wouldn't make breaking changes like this, especially for probably what's one of their largest services. One of the biggest complaints I heard about this was all around censorship, which kind of surprised me. But apparently, if you start putting if you only have the bucket name in the host name, it becomes easier to censor content from particular buckets, and using layer 7 filtering. I mean, any decent layer 7 filtering would let you filter down to the path level anyway. But one of the biggest complaints I heard about was the ease of censorship that this change would bring. So that obviously hasn't gone away since they walked back the change, at least not for new buckets. But it's I guess it's all around how they scale in the future with the service. So it's nice, and it's nice that there's going to be one way and only one way to reach the buckets, because with US East 1 being the special snowflake that it was for the longest time, it didn't match the same pattern as any of the other new regions. So standardization is good, I guess, but announcing a breaking change and then walking it back it's kind of crappy.
Yeah, I think it's a reminder that if we're going to be managing infrastructure, if our infrastructure is basically API calls, that now we have to manage that code that we write when we're writing code to provision and manage our infrastructure. So all that stuff is great. Automation is great, but then someone's got to maintain that code. This one's especially a good one because it's not just ops code. This is tons of application code that's been written to access S3 buckets. So I can imagine for some people, this is like their Y2K, except on a much more compressed timeline to go through and change all of your application code.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think I can see how they were like, look, we've been supporting V2 forever as the default kind of method that we use in the console and the SDK. It's been there for several years. This was really an artifact of a very legacy time in buckets. In the S3 service. And so, we're going to get this announcement. We're going to give you, a little bit over a year to fix this problem. And I'm sure, there's some developers who are just like, this isn't a big deal. And, we'll just make this announcement and it'll deprecate in a year. I don't think they quite expected the backlash that kind of came out of it. And Jeff Barr basically admitted in his blog post that they announced it way too quietly. It shouldn't have been posted on the forum first. It should have been announced through the blogs and through the different communication channels. And it was interesting. I don't know, Peter, you might remember this because you guys were a partner back then. But when I was at my partner back several years ago, when they changed the instance ID length, they scheduled an emergency call with us to tell us they were going to announce this change, and that if you're doing work on automation in your asset management database or whatever, to pull the instance size, that it was going to go from 8 characters to, I don't remember what the number of characters is now, but it was a pretty big deal. And they made a big deal of notifying the partners, notifying the customers what's going to happen, email communication, etc., where this was just kind of like a little whimper in the forum.
Yeah, I definitely remember that being much more loudly addressed and urgently addressed. Yeah, it was surprising, but I mean, I think that it's going to be our, we should expect. They should announce these things more clearly, but we need to be ready to expect to hear it and be ready to manage our code to handle it.
I mean, it's great for people who are currently actively developing a product still, and they can pivot from V1 to V2, and it may not be a big deal. But there's going to be a bunch of services out there which are no longer maintained, which people have probably paid money for, they're using, they've deployed, they may not have access to the code to make changes to things like this. And although they're giving us a year and a half worth of notice, if the companies aren't around anymore to support those older products, then Amazon making a change like this will effectively render those other things useless. So I think, I'd really prefer them to not break APIs and just introduce new ones. I didn't really see any upside for me either. I mean, great, so they're deprecating the old V1 style. Where's my upside? Is it going to work faster? Is it going to scale better? What's in it for me? You're making me go back and do this work. Why?
I think it's around the fact that there's limitations to what features they can add moving forward that will work with the V1 style path. So, and I think that's why their walkback was basically that they're gonna leave it for existing buckets and not allow V1 for new buckets. I could imagine a scenario where they're going to start releasing features that are not supported on V1 at all.
And Jeff actually says that in the blog post. So he talks about there was two big reasons that they were moving to the virtual host references. And I'll quote this from the blog post because I don't have it summarized. But first, anticipating a world with billions of buckets home to many dozens of regions, routing all incoming requests directly to a small set of endpoints makes less and less sense over time. DNS resolution, scaling, security, traffic management, including DDoS protection, are more challenging with a centralized model. The virtual hosted model reduces the area of impact, which we call the blast radius internally, when problems arise. This helps us to increase availability and performance. The second reason, the team has a lot of powerful features in the works, many of which depend on the use of unique virtual hosted style subdomains. Moving to this model will allow you to benefit from these new features as soon as they are announced. For example, we are planning to deprecate some of the oldest security ciphers and versions. Details on this to come later. The deprecation process is easier and smoother for you and for us if you're using a virtual-based host.
Number 3, I guess, which you didn't really mention, is browsers are all very hostname centric when it comes to things like cookies. And right now with V1, within a region, everyone shares the same hostname for the endpoint. So there's a potential security concern around that. So moving to V2 is advisable either way.
Yeah, so he kind of alluded to that with powerful features in the works, and I agree with you. That's a good third reason as well. There are other things that have been announced in the forums that are being deprecated or have some type of impact. Things like the SafeNet Luna is going out of maintenance in April 2020. Things like that. Summit Route has done a great job putting this together in a GitHub repo called AWS_breaking_changes. And so they basically are now tracking when these things get announced in the forum, when it was announced, the date is going to take effect, which service it's impacting, and then what the change will be, and how you can check to see if you're going to be impacted. They're trying to get this maintained and up to date, which Amazon really should be doing for them, but at least someone has taken the time to put this together. So you can track this, and they have a RSS feed for it and all the different ways to get notified of things getting changed in this repo. So if you are worried about this or you have things that you've been using for a long time, this is not a bad site to go to. So we'll have this in the show notes. You can link to it right from there. Azure App Service has updated their free Linux tier. Python and Java support has been increased, and more. The Azure App Service, which has released these enhancements, will now allow you to build, deploy, and run using a perpetually free tier of app services on Linux. It supports Python 3.7, 3.6, and 2.7. And Java 11 is now also available for Windows and Linux runtime. This new intrinsic build system on Linux handles resolving and installing Node.js for you and all the Python dependencies, all with a simple build script. So this is a nice improvement if you're using the Azure App Service to run your application workloads, now supporting Linux in a free tier as well as just Linux in general.
So I guess that they know who they need to attract Linux users.
I think that's been Azure's go-to for a while. It's that Linux has to be one of their use cases on their platform. Otherwise, people won't use it.
So we were chatting earlier before the show. Is App Service more like Heroku or Beanstalk?
Beanstalk and Heroku are very similar to each other. So I would say it's in the same family of products.
Kind of wonder why it's a thing. Why not just use Docker?
Yeah, well, that's the alternative.
Yeah.
Oh, a lot of people want that very simple Beanstalk experience that, just I want to write my code, I want to push it in my IDE, and I want to walk away and have it just work. All right, Amazon has announced a new generation of I/O optimized EC2 instances. This is an update to the original i3s, which were launched 2 years ago. Typically, customers are using these for hosting distributed file systems, relational and NoSQL databases, in-memory cache, key value store, etc. Customers apparently wanted lower price per terabytes of storage, increased storage density to allow for consolidation of workloads and scale-up processing, and a higher ratio of network bandwidth and instance storage to the vCPUs. So the new i3EN instances will provide all of that to you. In comparing it to the old i3, the cost per gigabyte of SSD instance storage on the instance is 50% lower. The storage density is 2.6% times greater, and ratio of network bandwidth is significantly improved as well at 2.7 times better. It also now supports the new Elastic Fabric adapter, and you can now use these in US East 1, West 2, East 1 in Europe, and on-demand and spot form. Reserved and dedicated hosts are coming very, very soon. If you want to know pricing for this one, I know Peter always asks me, the i3 Large would have cost you $113 per month. The i3EN Large is $164.98. So it's a little bit more expensive, but you get that better cost to gigabyte density and ratios.
Yeah, that's huge. This is we've done a ton of data center to AWS cost analyses for customers, and oftentimes these are the types of workloads that these instances support that become sort of bank breakers when you're doing a lift and shift and you're not transforming. So I think this is going to be pretty big for people running big Cassandra clusters and other things that they gotta bring with them.
Is that one of the things that was interesting? I sort of chuckled when I read through the blog post on this. Jeff Barr said, the crucial element here is that our customers were able to express their needs in a detailed and specific manner. Simply asking for something to be better, faster, and cheaper does not help us to make a well-informed decision. I was like, is that really, are you blaming me for bad PFRs? Is that what's happening in this one?
I mean, I do kind of like the model where you just get to pick exactly what you want, instead of having them bundle these pre-sized instances. I wish you could just say, I really do just want this many CPUs, this much RAM. I mean, for dedicated hosts and access to bare metal, that's a bit more complex, obviously. But for VMs, I wish they'd move into the just a la carte type style.
Well, they could support you with that, with the dedicated hosts, right? So you get the dedicated host, and you can carve it up any way you want to into VMs. I mean, not that I'd recommend you do this, but you could.
Yeah. It's pretty pricey.
It is pretty pricey.
Hey everyone, Jonathan here. I just wanted to take a minute to thank the cloud consulting gurus at Foghorn for helping make the Cloud Pod possible. These folks truly get it. Cloud consulting experts since 2008, they are premier tier partners with AWS, Google Cloud Platform Silver, and Microsoft Azure partners. From multi-cloud to containers to moving full production workloads to the cloud under the tightest compliance, Foghorn's team of full-stack cloud engineers have been there, done that, gotten the t-shirt, and are ready to share their experience with you. If you're in the market for some talent to supplement your team, visit www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. www.fogops.io/thecloudpod. Foghorn, the promise of cloud delivered.
Azure SQL Data Warehouse has released new capabilities for performance and security. These are several new features all around the SQL Data Warehouse. Azure says they are the market leader in price performance, flexibility, and security. The new features currently in preview are new results at caching capability, materialized views, and ordered clustered column store indexes for those doing column-sized workloads. Workload importance feature that enables users to decide how to workloads with conflicting needs get prioritized, which we talked about on the show previously, and a new automated statistics maintenance or auto update statistics feature to now keep your SQL Data Warehouse faster and more maintained from your statistics. The new dynamic data masking is now all available to you in the advanced security module, and this allows you to mask your PI data on the fly in your data warehouse. So nice improvements to their data warehouse capabilities.
Yeah, dynamic masking is great, and that's right in the realm of what they need for HIPAA compliance.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest pain points, because nobody, when you have to own that process, you can't just turn it on. It's a scary thing for organizations to allow.
So now between Google, where they talked a lot about their dynamic data masking and PII features, and Azure, this is an area that Amazon's lacking a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I don't think they have a feature in Redshift, do they?
I don't think they do, and they don't really have a lot of DLP capabilities built into the AWS platform in general. They kind of rely on their partner network for that today. Maybe an area for investment at Reinforce this year.
I'm not sure that data masking should be implemented at the database level rather than in the application. I mean, who better knows what the users and the user roles are supposed to be than the application itself?
Well, it's like in the case of Google, right? They weren't implementing. I mean, they have APIs you could leverage, of course, to do it, but that did get pushed to the application side. But the thing that Google had that I thought was cool was they had a bunch of reporting features that would basically scan your data warehouse or your database or whatever and identify, pretty well-known patterns and provide scores to you and reports of where that data is. And so if it wasn't supposed to be there, it then gave you the capability to then go and mask it with their platform if you needed to, but while you went and fixed your application, which was nice. So Google Cloud I/O was a few weeks ago, and they did have a very nice little wrap-up post about what was announced around Google Cloud at I/O, and so I thought we'd summarize that real quickly here. We talked about Android phone had built-in security key went to preview at Google Next. It is now generally available, so you can use your Android phone to unlock your access to the Google Cloud. The Cloud TPU version 2 and version 3 pods are now publicly available. They were in beta. The Cloud TPU pods accelerate the larger scale machine learning capabilities of the Google Cloud. They updated the Google Maps platform to now support WebGL-powered data visualization using the open source deck.gl library. And a public beta has now been opened for Maps for Android apps. So that's a pretty nice improvement. And then the Firebase database product was updated to expand machine learning capabilities, provide enhanced web performance monitoring, and a new analytics capability. So there was quite a few things that missed next that made it to Google Cloud at I/O. So definitely, if you're waiting for those on beta, they're now publicly available to you or GA'd.
Yeah, they just keep going. I mean, all the ML stuff that they're pushing out it's going to be interesting to see how if they can really just be number one in ML instead of trying to get every feature Amazon has.
I think their play is be number one in ML and be number one in Kubernetes, and that'll get market share.
Yep.
So it's not good for them. I don't know how I feel about this Android phone built-in security key for unlocking your access to Google Cloud. I don't know how I feel about that. Because I don't know if that's a security risk if my phone gets stolen and now I can log into the Google Cloud. I don't know.
Can I get that on my Huawei?
I don't know.
If you believe Trump, the entirety of China can get that on their Huawei.
All right. No politics, Jonathan. Steve Singh, the CEO of Docker, is stepping down. He's been at Docker now for 2 years. He will be replaced by the Hortonworks, former Hortonworks CEO Rob Bearden, who helped get that company acquired by their biggest competitor and has stepped down. Singh will stay on for a few months to transition to Bearden, but he will remain as chairman on the board. And apparently he's been working with Bearden for the last couple of months as a candidate to finally join the board and decided that, nope, he'd be better CEO and I'm going to step down. So very interesting.
Kind of makes me cast some doubt on whether or not Docker's going to be bought by VMware in this case. Figured he would, if that was in the works, then he would have stayed on for the remainder of that process.
That's maybe true, but it did say in the article that he apparently he's pretty tired of working 75 hours a week and has wanted to leave the company in capable hands. He did sign a $92 million investment this year into Docker and to all focus on getting their enterprise product to be better adopted by their customers. But on the other side of this VMware rumor, Bearden, before CEO of Hortonworks, was the CEO at SpringSource, which was a developer tool suite that was picked up by VMware for $420 million in 2009, and then was spun out to Pivotal afterwards. So he's been in a company that was purchased previously by VMware, so he may have some relationships at VMware to help sell Docker that way if that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting to me how much Docker has just lost mindshare, lost interest in the enterprise space. It's really just become everything Kubernetes. And it's really kind of a shame in some ways because Docker was really what started the whole thing, and they're kind of on the sidelines. But they had some pretty hostile approaches to business too that I think hurt them.
Yeah, not making any money yet either, are they?
Well, yeah. You got to be able to make money.
Yeah, well, I mean, if no one's going to buy your enterprise product, how do you make money as Docker? It's an interesting question. And then the people are moving off of Docker Hub, they're moving to platform native solutions. There's just a lot of missed opportunities by Docker, unfortunately. But
or you could just keep raising money forever.
Or you could do that, but eventually your investors do want their money back.
That's okay. Maybe IBM will buy them.
Oh, add it to their Red Hat acquisition. AWS Secrets Manager now supports client-side caching libraries to improve secrets availability and reduce your cost. So this is a new client-side caching library in Python, .NET, and Go. And this is in addition to some libraries I already had in Java and JDBC. Client-side caching can help improve availability of using secrets by reducing the impact of network availability issues, such as increased response times or temporary loss of network connectivity. This also reduces the number of API calls you're making to the API, and this will result in less costs for using secrets management.
I always laugh at when they use reducing the impact of network availability. I mean, we're talking about cloud services, which all the customers are using remotely anyway. So if you have network availability issues, then you have bigger app issues than just getting to Secrets Manager. But it's great that they finally put client-side caching in the library instead of asking people to reinvent it every single time they want to use Secrets Manager.
I mean, well, technically, is Secrets Manager available to you outside of AWS through the Direct Connect only, right?
It's not a public endpoint.
Maybe it is, but it's interesting to me on that because you're basically the network availability you're really worried about is Amazon's network availability.
Yeah, exactly.
And
right.
So you're not, if that's the problem, you have, like you said, Jonathan, you have bigger problems in general. But it's sort of like we're giving you mitigations against ourselves in case we screw ourselves up. That's what they're doing here. Microsoft, has been pretty all in on the cloud, but a recent study by Gartner and Crystallize has resulted in that they are lagging the competition in Azure reliability. AWS has a 99.9987% uptime in the last year. Google has 99.9982, and Azure has only 99.9792. So that's a bit of a miss. But they are doing a bunch of investments to try to hopefully fix this. Mark Russinovich, who's the CTO of Azure, says, we've invested a ton in capabilities that allow us to do maintenance with little to zero impact on customers. When you do thousands of these things and everything goes off fine, you're like, the process works, he said. But obviously something like an outage shows that there's a gap, and then we're always trying to close that gap out. So apparently they're going to be using machine learning in a project called Project Tardigrade to basically do predictive analytics of their hosts to basically pause the VM in memory and let the OS reboot underneath it and then reinstantiate the VM. And so this will be an impact of only a few seconds, so the workloads can be moved and not impact you as much. So they are trying to improve this. And he said, we want our service to be like the tardigrade, Rustovich said. Today, if the host platform goes down, VMs die and need to be rebooted. Tardigrade freezes the VMs in RAM, their states are preserved, and the OS reboots underneath them.
That's neat. And it's much less of an overhead than VMware vMotioning off to another host entirely, especially with such huge VMs floating around nowadays.
Yeah, especially if they've got a lot of they're using ephemeral storage.
Yeah.
It is pretty cool looking at those numbers though. That's like AWS and Google are almost exactly 5 nines, and Azure is almost exactly 4 nines.
I think there's some people who question those statistics. I mean, what exactly are you measuring when you're measuring AWS when they have 170 odd services? Is it the aggregate across all of their services?
They probably did talk about the methodology, but I wasn't going to pay Gartner to buy it.
Right.
But I'm sure they have whatever the way they're doing it is the same for all three providers. So even if it was just EC2 instance availability in a single region or in multiple regions aggregated together, they're still showing that comparing them apples to apples, much as they probably get to, it is slightly less in Azure.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's
All
not
right.
more or less, actually.
I was surprised. I was surprised that they're missing a whole 9. Really, like
Yeah.
that was interesting to me. I thought they'd be closer together in general.
That's
But
10 times more downtime.
yep. And based on the first 3 months of this year, that does feel that way. We've talked about Azure how many times having outages.
It is funny though, man. When you get to that level, 4 and 5 nines, it's like one outage just demolishes your numbers.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
And if I was Azure, I'd be saying, well, this is why we tell you to deploy in multiple regions, and 99.99 across 3 regions can still give you the availability you need to run a
Yep.
successful
It's interesting
application.
though because they're actually not telling you to do that. Very few of Azure's regions have more than 1 or 2 availability zones, and then they are offering you these premium versions of these services to get you better uptime. Like it's been in the announcements we talked about on the show here that premium gets you faster uptime, faster resolution, faster issues. So I mean that's Amazon's story, that's Google's story. Like use multiple availability zones. It doesn't necessarily follow through as much in the Azure world, and that's kind of a Windows versus Linux mentality in some ways.
Yeah. Pets versus cattle.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Well, that's it for the new news. Let's move on to the lightning round.
Azure has improved their portal with improvements to search, change tracking, and faster and more intuitive resource browsing.
The biggest advantage we have now for Azure is that now we can use the Chromium browser to browse them instead of the crappy old Edge browser.
Ding. All right, Azure Integration Services has simplified adoption of serverless with Azure Functions, including new SAP connectors, logic apps, and API management.
How hard is it to add in the SAP SDK to a bit of code I upload to Functions? I mean, is this sort of supposed to be like a layers competitor or some way to try to simplify Functions load? It's a little weird.
I think it's kind of like the Lambda drag and drop console where you link an event trigger to the function. It's basically just a way of programming the event response.
Azure now introduces Health to Azure Deployment Manager to detect problems with your deployment and automate rollback processes.
Welcome to MVP stage of a deployment system.
Ding. Amazon and its partners can now resell VMware on AWS.
So can you give me a deal on that, Peter?
I'm sure I could find a way to add value somehow by reselling VMware on AWS to
Fantastic.
AWS OpsWorks for Chef Automate now supports Chef Automate 2. By the way, if anyone noticed, I think it was like exactly 1 year to the date that Chef Automate 2 was released.
Well done.
AWS Storage Gateway enhances access controls for SMB shares to store and access objects in S3 buckets.
Those Windows for Workgroups hosts will be so happy now.
Yeah. It's not a file system. That's all I have to say. S3 is not a file system.
Unless you're using Storage Gateway, and then it is.
It's not. Promise you.
What about Fuse? Can I use Fuse for this?
Probably. AWS Systems Manager Patch Manager supports Microsoft application patching.
So the Windows patching it did before didn't support Microsoft? This is a little weird.
Oh no, it didn't do apps before. Now it also does apps.
I mean, how many apps from Microsoft are you running on your servers in production? I mean, if you're running Office there, I guess I'm sorry for you.
I have seen that done.
I have too. Reservation expiration alerts now available in AWS Cost Explorer.
Okay, they're going to let you know that you need to spend another several $100,000 on 3-year upfront RIs. Perfect.
We have successfully automated the AWS account executive.
and your TAM.
Yeah. Amazon Cognito launches enhanced user password reset API for administrators. This allows an incognito admin to reset temporary or permanent passwords for their end users.
This is cool. People have been asking for this for a long time because sometimes end users get into this state where they just can't fix things for themselves and you end up deleting their user accounts and recreating them. So it's about time. Kind of wonder why this didn't exist before.
Yeah, this is a weird one to me too. I was like, I didn't know you couldn't do this, but I can imagine this is a use case that they were asked for from day one.
Okay. You can now share encrypted AMIs across accounts to launch instances in a single step.
This is a nice feature because the encryption story for root volume AMI stuff was really bad. And so I'm glad they've been really trying to fix these use cases of, I have an instance, I want to be able to launch it and then encrypt it when I launch it. Or if I have an encrypted one when I start, I want to be able to keep it encrypted without relaunching keys. Like there's a lot of nice improvements in this whole story and workflow. I imagine this is all very much tied to the Jedi contract in some ways, but super happy about that.
Yeah, I'm not sure who's keeping data on AMIs, which needs to be kept encrypted at rest.
Like maybe for machine learning workloads or something, some base data set that you need to, train your model. Maybe you have that encrypted on the AMI, but you only launch the AMIs when you do the SageMaker job. So stuff like that. Or if you've stolen Google's Pi calculation, maybe you need to encrypt it. Maybe you're concerned.
No, but the other reason is people they'll have apps that run that copy and use the root volume for temporary files, and so they need it even if there's nothing on the AMI, on the AMI. It's nice to know that you're spinning those things up with encrypted volumes.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I remember writing some horrendous automation around this for CentOS whereby it spun up an unencrypted root volume, and then at the first boot time, it actually did like a live migration of these LVM volumes to an encrypted set of LVM volumes. It was just a complete nightmare. So
Yep.
I'm so glad that they've sort of opened up the options around encrypted and non-encrypted deployments.
Oracle has launched a new Tokyo region.
I mean, from a global warming perspective, I'm a little bit concerned about all these data centers that are being spun up around the world by Oracle that aren't being used. It seems like a lot of energy waste.
Yeah, maybe it's a tiny little closet with one 1U server in it.
You assume that at least running Oracle Rack, so it has to at least be 4.
Yeah, good point. Oracle has released global replication for Cloud Bigtable as GA.
This is a great option for big tables, and being able to do global enables a lot of use cases. So this is a great one. I'm glad to see this one got GA'd finally. It's been in beta forever.
What's sad is that they waited for some big customers to push them on it before they actually did something about it. But I guess customer-driven development is the way you make money. So
Yeah, well, it also makes sure you don't waste your time building a bunch of stuff that nobody wants when you could have been building stuff that people wanted.
yeah, but if you build it, they will come. That's what they said in the movie.
That is what they said.
That's how I feel about Tokyo region for Oracle.
Yeah.
If you build it, they won't ever come.
Yeah, how did that work out for VMware's Air Cloud Air?
What?
vCloud.
vCloud, yes,
vCloud.
vCloud.
vCloud Air.
Yeah, vCloud Air, yes.
It didn't work out
They
so
built
well.
it though. It's just they didn't come. Amazon EKS adds support for public IP addresses within cluster VPCs.
I didn't realize this was a thing you couldn't do. I guess, I mean, it would make sense to me that you would maybe want to have public IPs in certain pods on your Kubernetes cluster, especially if it's like running Nginx proxy, because you're doing your own proxying layer, or you're using Envoy, or doing any other type of more advanced mesh networking. It makes sense that this would have been there. So this one was a bit of a surprise to me that this wasn't supported. I just figured you'd launched the node in a public IP space. It would work. I never tried it though.
I think they just assumed that you were going to use API gateway and load balancing on the front end of this, and you wouldn't need public IPs in the VPC. And of course, people don't want to pay for stuff that they either doesn't perform as well as they expect, or that they don't need.
Or, you want to use mesh networking and Envoy and all those things, and you just want that capability. So, yeah.
It feels hilarious, though, that I want a managed service, but I want it in my private VPC.
Yeah.
But I want to make it public. Could have just used a public endpoint. All right. You can now create fine-grained session permissions using AWS Identity and Access Management managed policies.
I fundamentally disagree with anybody who uses this as a way to improve their security posture, because since when did voluntarily reducing your permissions, help you? Is the hacker going to come along and say, oh, actually, I don't need root access? No, of course they're not. So if you do an assume role and don't pass a policy, nothing changes. So I'd like to know what drove this, really.
Yeah, that's my question too. What was the use case for this that they felt was necessary?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you have a service role for like a Jenkins or a Terraform deployment user, and they have access to deploy all the services. I mean, the orchestration around narrowing down the policy at execution time so that you only get permissions to the things you actually need, it just blows the mind that anybody actually would request something like this.
Well, there you have it. Someone did. You can now monitor emails in your work mail organization using CloudWatch metrics and logs.
Wow, that's unfortunate for whoever chose workmail at their organization. Where they're like, it's going to increase productivity, and now I can prove it doesn't.
It seems like all this stuff was included in SES monitoring anyway. Incoming and outbound failures and bounce rates and things like that. It's kind of strange.
I have a side project that uses workmail, and it's fine, but it is nothing similar to Google or to Office 365. It's, if you're going to make this attempt, like, make a good product. I wish they would invest.
Yeah. Maybe they're just exposing the SES-like metrics for workmail. I assume workmail uses SES under the covers, so.
It does, yep.
And finally, you can now launch encrypted EBS-backed EC2 instances from unencrypted AMIs in a single step. Finally. Awesome. I think Chromium gets it.
Oh, okay.
We were tied on dings, so tiebreaker goes to Chromium.
Nice.
Well, thank you very much.
Can we talk a little bit here about this this mention of the word AMI versus AMI? And so is this a new affliction of yours, Peter?
AMI? I've said AMI for a long time. I also say AMI, but sometimes I say AMI.
I mean, I think it's the first time you've ever dropped it on this podcast. I don't know how I feel about it, and it kind of it's disturbing in a way that I get that that's Amazon's official tense. That's AMI, but no one should call it AMI.
Maybe
there's T-shirts on this
that
say it's AMI as a 3-letter word. Like you need to, or 3-syllable acronym. You need to pick a side, Peter, because I don't know.
Okay, I get it. You can throw tomatoes at me now.
Well, Peter just wants to launch his EBS.
EBS volumes.
Yes,
encrypted EBS, encrypted EBS with my AMI in multiple regions. It's fantastic.
That X2 service.
I'm gonna get my X going. I'm gonna get all on my Oz platform. It's fantastic.
Oh, I can't wait. Now I'm gonna look for the best word that's made up out of a service, and I'm gonna drop it next week.
Fantastic. Well, fantastic, Peter. Thank you for hosting Lightning Round as always. I still have a commanding lead by 2 points, though.
You do.
So I'm gonna keep.
You almost had it today too. You were definitely more active.
Yeah, well, Jonathan's asleep on the wheel.
He is asleep at the wheel, but he snuck one in. But don't count on those, Jonathan.
And that is the Week in Cloud. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Foghorn Consulting. Subscribe today on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and tweet us your feedback at #TheCloudPod.
You can now share encrypted AMIs across accounts to launch instances in a single step on Project AWS.
I think it's a typo on Project AWS.
Oh, really? What is it supposed to be?
I think it's just AWS.
Okay, I'll start over.
And it's not AMIs.
Yeah, and you said AMIs. I can't.
AMI? You say AMI?
No, AMI. It's 3 syllables. AMI. No. Don't make me get Corey to come back on the show and have a talking to you.
Okay.